Every moment to do it.
Zack Polanski and Ellie Chowns MP. And a round of applause, Leslie comes to stage. Welcome everybody to the Hustings Hall. It's a great honour to welcome you to the London Green Party of England and Wales Leadership Hustings. My name is Danny Keeling, and I am your coordinator for London, and I shall be chairing this evening. I'm very happy to welcome Zack Polanski, our current Deputy Leader of the party and a London Assembly member, and Ellie Chowns MP for North Herefordshire, who's running as co-leader of the party, but one of our current leaders, Adrian Ramsey, who's your MP for Wakeman Valley. A great welcome to both of you. I've received questions ahead of this evening, and all the questions I have accepted are directed at both the candidates. I've not allowed any questions to be for any singular person or directed to ensure a very fair hustings this evening. And both candidates will have 4 minutes for opening and closing statements. And I'm going to be strict, so I do have time. I will give you 3 minutes each for each question after. Cool. You get 3 minutes each, and then if you wish to respond to which each of us have said, you get 1 minute, and then another 1 minute rebuttal. The event will be streamed and recorded on Zoom. Hello, everybody on Zoom. So members to watch in their leisure. Members on the chat will not have the chat enabled, and I can't do any IT help from this far, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry about that. Nor the ability to ask any questions either. If a question has been submitted and they are on Zoom, I shall do my best to do so on their behalf. At no point is this a town hall meeting, and if you have brought in any rotten vegetables, please keep them in your bags. I will not allow heckling or harassment, and I would like to remind everyone of our green values and our great code of conduct. So with all that explained, I wish to start with opening statements. I will hand over to, I'm just going to go over to you. We didn't actually pre-agree this, and I should have. If you would like to go first, then.
Cool, I'll go first. Thanks very much, Danny. Thanks everybody for being here. It's really brilliant to see you, and what an amazing venue. So thanks, Rob. I think it's that we've got to thank for bringing us here. I suppose I'd like to start by saying, actually, this is a leadership hosting. It's a contest between myself and Adrian and Zack, the leadership of the party. And there are some differences between us, of tone, of style and focus. But actually, there's so much more that unites us than that divides us. And I think it's just so important to remember that. All of us here in this room, we're brought together as part of a kind of, basically a green family of members, of activists, of people who want to work together to make the world a better place, to build that greener, fairer country that got us all involved in politics in the first place. And it's so important, to remember that and connect with that, I think. And that's kind of at the core of, that little strapline that Adrian and I have got about Together We Win. That kind of represents what we're talking about, not just that we're together working as a co-leadership team, but that both of us recognise that having been elected as MPs, we did that by working together with a huge team of activists. I wouldn't be an MP if it wasn't for the 450 plus people who came and got involved in my campaign. So many people locally, but also people from around the country. At least one person in this room came from London to help us campaign all the way 4 hours away in North Herefordshire. And I'm hugely grateful to that, hugely grateful to everybody who's engaged and involved. And I believe that there's a by-election in Barking at the moment. So there are people, green activists, right at this moment out campaigning there. So huge credit and thanks to everybody who's doing that. By campaigning together, that's how we win trust from voters, and that's how we win influence. as Greens. That's how we win Green seats. And we have learned, you know, some hard-won lessons over the years. We're standing on the shoulders of the giants. We've been here at the party for 50 years, but it's only in the more recent years that we've actually learned how to win council seats, how to win MP seats. And that's how we've managed over the last few years under Adrian and Carla's leadership, with Zack a deputy for part of that time, to double our councillor numbers, to quadruple our MP numbers. And Adrian and I are hugely ambitious about building on that and growing transformationally based on that incredibly strong practical base of support and the credibility that we now have as a party, showing that we can win elections. Because, oh my goodness, the Green voice is so desperately needed in politics. We've got a Labour government that people feel rightly completely let down by, betrayed by. All those people who voted a year ago for change are feeling that they've just got more of the same. Who is it in Parliament that's standing up, calling for taxing wealth fairly? Who is it in Parliament that's standing up, calling out our country's complicity in genocide in Gaza? Who is it in Parliament who's been there at the forefront of the campaigns to reverse the universal credit and PIP bill, to reverse the winter fuel cuts, to campaign for social housing targets, in a particular campaign of mine, to fix social care, to have the real climate action that we so desperately need to tackle the climate crisis? On all of those things, Greens have been at the centre of these debates in Parliament, holding government to account and connecting the frustration, indeed the anger that's felt outside, the activist movements, the protesters, with using those levers of political power, just as everyone who's a councillor does that at local level. So we know we've got to get more Greens elected. That's what the Green Party is for. We know that the huge challenges that face our country mean that time is short. We've got to seize these opportunities, the blowing open of the old two-party system, the desperate need for these fresh new faces to break through, and for them to be Green faces, not the misinformation, the polarisation of reform, but the positive vision that is offered by Green politics. And so we need to combine that frustration and that anger. Last two sentences. Yeah. We need to combine channeling that frustration and anger, that sense of protest and that desire for a change, a genuine change in politics, with the wisdom that has come from learning how we win elections through Target to Win, through connecting with the widest possible range of voters. That's the leadership that Adrian and I offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Brilliant, and I'm going to pass it to Zack for it.
Thank you very much, and thanks all for being here. I want to start by addressing Ellie's remarks and say that I absolutely agree. I have a huge amount of time for Ellie, and I think we've been robust in this contest, as we should be robust, because these things matter. Journalists keep asking me constantly, you know, is there huge animosity? And I'm like, no, it's an election. We're gonna fight it, we're gonna campaign, and then whatever happens at the end, we're all gonna come together and be the Green Party. As I was coming here tonight, I was looking around the city and I was thinking about Londoners. And obviously I serve Londoners as an elected member of the London Assembly, and I think all the time about the people who are sleeping rough on our streets, about the people who are disabled in our city, who need accessible transport and a social model of disability, of the people who are living in council housing but have damp and mould, and have been let down by successive governments and indeed their councils, often Labour councils, who say that they were going to be different to the Tories, but actually more of the same. I think about the migrants in our city, not just the people that I've campaigned on the picket lines, such as United Voices of the World. Recently, I was at St. Heliers Hospital, where with 200 migrants, so Indian, Nepalese, and Ghanaian migrants, who are fighting for a living wage. There's something called Agenda for Change in the National Health Service, but these migrants aren't even getting the Agenda for Change wage. So I turned up with them on the picket line, and there was an NHS executive meeting going on. The NHS board wouldn't listen to them, but when I turned up, they stopped and they listened to them. Now, obviously, I was delighted that happened in terms of we made the connection, but I was also furious. What does that say about power in this country? Where I'll only listen to an elected official or someone else that it seems is having power. But your cleaner, your caterer, your porterer, the people who are keeping our city running, both in London and across the city, completely ignored. And since COVID, we have seen billionaire wealth in this country double, whilst our public assets have been completely stripped away. So what I'm really talking about here is the deep inequality that's happening all across England and Wales, but is really prominent in our city. People think London is a very wealthy place, and there are certainly places that have huge wealth in London. I can see Paul here from the City of London, not that I blame you personally. But also, even in the City of London, all across, there are people where poverty is absolutely living against excess wealth. And we know as a party that we want to tax multimillionaires and billionaires because it is corporations who are destroying our environment, destroying our democracy, and destroying our communities. And of course, the climate crisis is at the heart of that. We live in one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and the inequality is exactly exacerbating that climate crisis. And the people who've done the least to cause it are facing the worst impacts. And why am I saying all of this? Because people are exhausted. They are exhausted of politics. They look at Westminster and they want people to fight for them. I'm running for leader of the Green Party because I think we need to step up. I think we need to step up this fight on the climate crisis, the nature crisis, on the inequality, the fact now that there are fascist thugs on the streets who are threatening refugees and people seeking asylum in hotels. They need us to be loud. They need us to be present. And sometimes that will be uncomfortable because the core of our values is kindness and compassion. And it must remain that way. I'm not suggesting we get nasty. I am suggesting we get effective though. I am suggesting we get heard. Far too often we are on the sidelines. It is time for the Green Party to step into the light, to take the fight to reform, to challenge this failing Labour government. It is not enough for us just to ask questions in Parliament. I'm so happy before MPs are there. I worked really hard, as you all did, to get them there. But it's not enough. It's not enough for us to give ourselves a gold star that things are getting better. We need to fight for a better country. So when you vote on Friday, think about what's on that ballot paper, because we agree on strategy, we agree on policy. The central question that is with you tonight is who do you want communicating for you? Who do you want on that debate stage taking it to the Prime Minister? Who do you want on the media? And who do you want going up and down this country at rallies, in community halls, in faith organisations and community centres, saying it is time for a bold Green Party of environmental, social, racial and economic justice? Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to questions that are pre-submitted. Just as a reminder, you get 3 minutes each, which after, if either you do wish to respond, you get 1 extra minute, and then I'll give the other person an extra minute to respond to the response.
Sounds like a combined conference.
We can try and flesh it out then at least. So the first question is from Mike Hodges. Is Mike Hodges in the room? Yeah. Excellent. Mike, I'm going to run a microphone down to you. Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Mike Hodges, Harrogate Green Party and Unite the Union. How do we demonstrate that net zero policies will cut the cost of living and that the Green Party won't do to oil and nuclear power workers what Thatcher did to mining communities?
I'm going to start with Zack as Ellie took the opening statement.
Yes, so thank you, Mike. The first thing is we've got to work with the unions, and I'm really proud in this race that Ian Hodson, who is the president of the Bakers Union, is endorsing me. To talk about why that's significant, that's the first time that a trade union has endorsed someone outside of the Labour Party in decades. In fact, maybe forever, we don't know, but I'll say decades, to be safe. I'm also speaking in October at Workers' Planet, which is in Brighton. This is the campaign of trade unions against climate change, which is looking at a year of national action to tackle the climate. Now, at the heart of that campaign and at the heart of your question is we need a just transition, but that cannot come from the top down. It cannot come from politicians in Westminster thinking they know best. It has to come from the workers themselves co-designing. It also needs to challenge reform. Reform have taken £2.3 million in donations since the last election. So it's no wonder that they're anti-net zero. George Carlin said that politicians should wear it like NASCAR drivers who's sponsoring them on their t-shirts, to be really clear about this. So when we talk about net zero, we need to be clear that our own invested interests are people and the planet. Now, there will be difficult conversations with workers. We need to phase out nuclear. We need to make sure that we're shifting to new renewable energies. But there's a huge opportunity here to make sure that people in the public sector, that we have more jobs, first of all, but also that they can have proper pay, dignity at work, sick leave, and all the working conditions that you'd expect people to have. and also removing the anti-trade union laws that, of course, the Tories did, but also the Labour Party have made even worse. Not just rolling back the last few years, but actually all going back to the 70s and making sure that workers have the rights to organise and the rights to work. And then the final thing is, I think we need to win the argument on net zero. Right now, it far too often comes down to someone having to buy an electric car or a heat pump. That's individual responsibility. Now, if someone has power or wealth to do it, sure, make the right choice. I'm all for that. But actually, it's not right that I went to Sheffield the other day. The train was about £200 return. I didn't look at it. I imagine if I took a plane, it probably would have been cheaper. Now, that's not some natural order. That's because the government is subsidising jet fuel and they're not subsidising train travel. Those are political choices. So we need to push this government to make the right political choices, both for the things we buy, how we heat our homes, how we get around, and crucially to your question, how we organise the workforce to make sure we have a just transition for the future jobs. Because that's the only way, by making sure workers are at the table, that they're co-designing. And this is done, yes, in Westminster. Politicians have got to vote on it effectively at the end. But rather than being it done to communities, it's got to be done with communities.
Thank you very much, sir. And over to Ellie.
Thanks very much, Mike. It's a really good question, and it goes to the heart of the anxieties that some people feel about the transition to a climate-safe world. People are worried about the costs that might come on their families. They're worried about the costs that might come on their livelihoods. And those fears are being stoked and whipped up in an incredibly cynical way by some people, specifically people in reform. But we do know that climate change is going to cost us a huge amount, not just financially, but also in terms of well-being. We're seeing those costs already: flooding, overheating, excess heat deaths. We are seeing that already. The thing we've got to do as Greens is connect those stories and explain how it is that the green policies, for example, home insulation, everyone wants to live in a warm home. Nobody wants to live in a home that leaks heat, where their bills are going up while the heat is literally going out the chimney and the windows. But the government has missed opportunity after opportunity. It hasn't just missed opportunities. Previous governments have actively refused to take the role that they should have done to support home insulation. We need a nationwide home insulation programme to get everybody's home up to scratch. We need the regulations that will make sure that whenever a new house is being built, it'll be net zero from the start. It'll be properly insulated from the start. This is the stuff I've been hanging on about in Parliament, meeting with ministers, with laying down amendments to the planning and infrastructure bill, holding debates on. Yes, it's long work. Yes, we're chipping away at a lot of opposition, let's face it, at powerful developers who say, oh, we can't afford that. How are we going to afford that? Despite the fact that their average profit, the three big developers on houses over the last 10 years was 37%. I mean, it's extraordinary. This is why politics matters, because politics is the way you change these levers. So yes, we've got the ideas. We need to get the political power to make sure that we're able to exert those levers, make those policy changes happen. On the just transition, yes, of course, people were worried about what's going to happen to their jobs. I was speaking just the other day, just last week, to somebody who's really closely involved in the Just Transition campaign, and she was talking about how it was actually the oil and gas workers themselves concerned about wanting a viable future for themselves and their families. It was their advocacy that persuaded the unions themselves to engage more and more with the activists. And now you've got environmental organisations and unions working together wherever they have common ground, recognising there are some areas of difference, but working together incredibly constructively to campaign for a just transition. And we know that environmental jobs, the sorts of jobs that we see on wind turbines or EVs or...
I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the clock properly on that. We know that those jobs are far more efficient in terms of translating government support and subsidy into good quality jobs than some of the other things that our government's talking about, nuclear weapons, for example. So there's a huge, big win to be had here with the just transition and with making that case for ecological justice to go hand in hand with social and economic justice.
Thank you, Ellie.
I have to admit, it's not a rebuttal, I'm just being cheeky, so I've got a London audience. So I've chaired the Environment Committee in London for the last few years and held Sadiq Khan to account, and one of the first things I discovered was the skills gap for retrofitting, and actually it was Ellie talking about insulation that prompted this thought. It's a demonstration of what elected Greens can do and the difference we make, because now there is millions of pounds more going into London into training up the next generation to be able to retrofit those homes. Now, of course, the problem is we're still building far too many homes that are going to need to be retrofitted in just a few years' time. When you've got a climate crisis, that makes absolutely no sense. But I just wanted to point out that's one thing elected Greens have done. Another thing, one of my proudest pieces of work is I worked with the University of College London, UCL, and a group of women all around the world, from Nepal, Tibet, Sri Lanka, women who are on the front line of the climate crisis, but particularly looking at the just transition. The project is called Gender and Intersectional Response to Climate Adaptation. And what I did was worked with those women around what happened in their countries for the just transition, particularly the global inequality in the global south, and created recommendations to the mayor, particularly around citizens' assemblies, about co-design for women to do the just transition.
Thank you, Zack.
I'll just briefly pick up with another example of how green voices can help shift policy change. So when I got into Parliament, I said I would be really happy if I was known as Mrs. Solar Panels by the end of the Parliament, and I banged on about this repeated time, held debates and so forth, and was really pleased that government did announce in May that they're going to make solar panels default on top of houses. I am not ending there. We've got to make sure that the fabric of homes, that's absolutely key. We've got to make sure that we tackle embodied carbon. It's a much less kind of sexy aspect of the ecological impact of homes, but it's increasingly important. So these are the things that I'm working on really hard in Parliament, and it's good to see that Greens working with others can help to get these policy changes.
Thank you, Mrs. Solar Panels.
Dr. Solar Panels. Do you know what? I'm on the Environmental Audit Select Committee, and one of the things that we get to do there is we scrutinise ministers. Maybe I'll tell you later about the aviation minister who drove me mad, but the planning minister drove me mad the other day by calling me Miss Chowns. So I've decided I'm going to readopt my doctor title so that just to make absolutely clear.
Do I have Martin Parker? Excellent. Can you remember your question, Martin? Excellent. Rob is just flying to you in a carbon neutral plane. Thank you, Rob.
What are your proposals to address the high costs in rent and rates for small businesses and community organisations where the building or land is owned by local government? How would you ensure your proposals comply with best value criteria?
And again, I will start with Ellie on this one.
Thanks. It's a really good question, and I served as a councillor previously for 7 years and as a cabinet member, and this is something we engaged with in a really practical way. So when the administration we were part of took power back in 2019, shortly after that, we bought an old shopping centre that basically it was at risk of being bought by a company that was going to let it go into terrible decline and kind of then try and do something else with the land. So we bought it, and we wanted to use that purchase to kind of regenerate the local area. And so we put in place a kind of 3-tier system for rents for local organisations in order precisely to do this sort of thing, to support community organisations, to help new start-up businesses to kind of have a temporary base that they could try out their business idea with. So it's just an example of how councils do have like a surprising amount of power, a good amount of power to be able to use their resources, their assets flexibly. But there's a broader issue here around, you talked about business rates, also around council tax. You know, there are so many aspects of our taxation system that are grossly unfair. You know, council tax is an incredibly unfair taxation system. Somebody in a normal house up in the north of the country pays more council tax than somebody in a mansion in Kensington. You know, that's utterly ridiculous. So we actually, Zack and I were on a podcast the other day and having quite a big conversation actually about taxation, and we both agree we need to reform taxation, you know, overall. Greens have got some really good ideas about this. talking about land value tax, talking about taxing wealth fairly. You know, we have got some really good ideas about making the taxation system work so that we support the good things. This is what I always talk about the tax. It's how we all put into a pot to fund the things that make life worth living for everybody, the public services that we need, the support that people need according to their needs, and how we can make sure that we do things like support small businesses. We want to be taxing the big businesses that are able to do profit shifting and all the rest of it, so that we can support all of those small businesses that are so essential. They're literally the backbone of the economy. That things are, you know, they're skewed at the moment. They're really the wrong way around. Our economy works in a way that supports the big businesses, makes it much easier for them than the little ones. And that shouldn't be the way that it works. So I found at the local level, in a very conservative facing area, that green policies on supporting small business is something people find really attractive about what we offer.
Thanks very much, Ellie.
Yeah, you're all going to have to ask some questions where we actually disagree, because I've looked on to what Ellie just said. I'll add some thoughts to it. There's an amazing place in Bristol actually called Sparks, which is where there was an old kind of big supermarket. I think it might have been a Marks and Spencer's. It's now been taken over by people, and a lot of them are doing climate projects. So energy efficiency information, a repair shop, climate education. I know Extinction Rebellion have got workshops going on in there. And I just think it's an amazing example of where you could have had this very ugly building on the high street that is, I'll talk about dead spaces in a second, but this dead space that could get graffiti and boarded up, and it just generally feels like the whole area is declining. Or the council can go, what would it look like if we let this place be for the community? If we had musicians and artists in here, because actually that's going to improve the area too, and help to deal with inequality. We know that art, as well as sport, is a great leveler. It helps people all be able to have a similar experience of community and what's going on. So Sparks is one example. In Stroud, they've got something called the Long Table, which is, again, is kind of an old building where not a lot of stuff is being used. The council's taken it over. It now is a restaurant, but when you go there, you can pay it forward. So you can buy a meal for yourself and for a homeless person, and everyone kind of sits together on a long table. The reason why I said I'll come back to dead spaces is Sian Berry, who was my former colleague in the London Assembly before she got demoted to another job. She's now her MP for Parliament for Brighton Pavilion. She did an amazing piece of work around dead spaces, which is very much what Ellie's talking about, really, which is about councils pairing up community groups with these dead spaces and saying, rather than having them abandoned, what does it look like if we use them? Absolutely, business tax relief. I think there is a conversation about taxation where we need to tax the wealthy, but we need to tax the wealthy for inequality reasons. Actually, if we're talking about funding public services, anything we can do, we can afford. And actually, there's things called spending multipliers. So every pound we spend into the economy, particularly for capital infrastructure to tackle the climate crisis, is money that we're then recreating in green jobs, we're then recreating into the communities. So there is a big conversation about taxation. Finally, for a very relevant example, we've got Oxford Street, which for Mayor is pedestrianising. Yay! There is caution, though, and Caroline Russell, my colleague on the Assembly, is really watching him like a hawk on this, and it's really important. Because if something is pedestrianised, but then corporate companies are allowed to be the people who decide what happens on that street, and it just gets filled with tables or market stalls. I'm not against tables or market stalls, but just that. They can start to make rules like you can't bring your own food here after 6 p.m. You can't have selfies here. You can't skateboard here or play ball games. It's this contradiction between public-private space. And we saw this during the pandemic, that if you were wealthy enough to have a nice garden, you had somewhere to go. But for those of us and many people who don't have a big garden in London, where do you go? You've got the public park, but lots of those public spaces started to close unless you're a resident. And what we're doing is increasing that inequality we already know, where social housing is built within private housing, but you have poor doors or a playground that only some people can go to. So Oxford Street, I think, is one to watch. We need to make sure that the shops that are built on there, they get reduced rates if you're doing something for public service. So a plant-based restaurant, for instance, I would really encourage to have lower rates, or if you're doing a repair shop or something for the environment. So let's be smart about how we redesign our high streets.
Thank you. And over to Ellie.
I haven't got a huge amount to kind of add. I suppose one thing I was just looking at the question, because you asked about how this is compatible with best value criteria, and just to kind of really sort of specifically pick up. what we were able to do in Herefordshire Council with the work I was describing and lots of other things was we put in place procurement criteria that recognised the social value of things, not just the kind of raw financial value. And so it meant that in whether we were procuring, I don't know, consultancies to do carbon footprinting or road maintenance contracts and things like that, we were explicitly recognising social value as part of the procurement process. And I think that's a really important move and a kind of key power that councils have got. So, for example, we can say we want companies that provide apprenticeships. We want companies that make a commitment to sourcing stuff from other local companies to kind of build up that local economy. And yeah, councils have got this real opportunity to use this, and that kind of speaks to a fundamental issue with our economic system, which is, you know, you can count the cost of everything and know the value of nothing, right? If we just measure everything in very raw, basic financial terms without thinking about the long-term payback, what Zack was talking about there, if you invest money in the local economy, it recycles and then you get a lot of value out of that. So I think Greens, again, have got something really important to say in terms of our critique of the narrowness of our economic models that seem to underpin current government policy making.
Brilliant. I don't know if you've got anything more.
Yeah, well, again, to economic models, because I said anything we can do, we can afford, but obviously there is two barriers there. One is inflation, and the second, more importantly, I would say, is ecological boundaries. So absolutely, we should be investing in things, we should be building things, but obviously we've also got to recognise that we have a climate crisis. We're not meeting our targets, we both need to mitigate, and we need to adapt to climate. I'm partly playing to the gallery because I've got Councillor Keeling next to me, but in Newham we have London City Airport. That just should not exist. There is no reason for London City Airport. And actually, what would it look like if we made sure that there was a big public space there? We built thousands, if not tens of thousands, of social homes and council homes there to make sure people actually had a place to live. 1 in 12 flights in this country, or sorry, 1 in every 12 minutes, a private jet takes off. Some of them from London City Airport. That is completely the pinnacle of climate injustice. That is very wealthy people in the middle of our city, polluting an area that has a lot of people living in poverty, a lot of Black and Asian communities there, all breathing in that terrible air pollution, the carbon being pumped out from the aviation. At the same time, we have people sleeping homeless on the streets. So when it comes to how do we redesign our city and what does better value look like, we really need to take into account ecological value, social purpose, and what does it look like to tackle the climate crisis and build a better London.
Thank you, Zack.
It's almost like
If we got rid of City Airport, I might be able to sort out the worst borough in the whole of the UK for temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
And my next question is from Andre Fries, who is not in the room, so I'm going to read it out on her behalf. I've experienced anti-Semitism by Green Party members. I witnessed Green Party councillors make anti-Semitic posts on social media with impunity. The Green Party's policy on anti-Semitism is now being attacked, with a motion being brought to conference to change it, claiming it will bolster the party's ability to both tackle anti-Jewish racism and advocate for Palestinians' rights. Do you believe that the Green Party's current policy on anti-Semitism stops any party members from advocating for Palestinian rights? And further, what action will you take as leader to tackle anti-Semitism in the party and ensure that Jewish members like me are still? Who did I go for first? It's your turn.
Thank you. It's not enough to just not be racist. We have to be actively anti-racist. It's not enough to just not be transphobic. We have to be actively anti-transphobic. And it's the same thing with anti-Semitism. Now, obviously, maybe not obviously, I'm a Jewish man. I'm one of the few Jewish people who have ever been in leadership positions in British political history. I'm really proud of the position our party has taken and I've taken on the genocide in Gaza. And there is nothing anti-Semitic about calling out the genocide, saying that we should not be selling arms to Israel. And we are not just complicit in what is happening in the genocide in Israel, we are active participants as a government. You can do all of this and in the same breath recognise that Jewish communities in this country often feel like they're under threat and have experienced anti-Semitic behaviour. That's completely unacceptable. Now in the party we have a disciplinary system that is completely independent of the political leadership. And that is absolutely right. And I'm a staunch advocate and will continue to be that leadership and politicians should never get involved with disciplinary processes. When it came to, I believe the question was probably talking about the IHRA statement, we did not adopt just the IHRA, and that's something that mainstream Jewish organisations have criticised me and the party for. But I'm actually really proud of the position we took. Anti-Semitism is complex, and actually I think there's between 10 and 12 definitions from different Jewish academics. Rather than having a debate on conference where we said one person has a monopoly on anti-Semitism or what it is to be a Jewish person, we looked at all these definitions and said, let's create a framework, guidelines of what it looks like to tackle anti-Semitism. That's what the Green Party adopted. So if there's ever any complaint about anti-Semitism in the party, the disciplinary committee or whoever is deciding, looks at these different definitions, looks at the complexity of this, and says no one should have a monopoly on wisdom. This is about balancing, looking at exactly what's been said or done, and then making a decision. I think that's actually a smart political move, not just political, but I also think it's the right thing to do morally and ethically. It's coherent to say if you find one Jewish person, they cannot represent the whole of the Jewish community in the same way that a Muslim person can't represent the whole of the Muslim community. I think we need to be compassionate about this. I think we need to be caring about this and recognise that there are differences of opinions. The boundaries are really clear. Anti-Semitism is not acceptable. Islamophobia is not acceptable. And the proudest work I've done as a London Assembly member is when I've worked on interfaith work. Because I know as a Jewish person, when they come for one of us, they come for all of us. And the best response is solidarity with our Muslim siblings, as they will say about their Jewish siblings. Let's stay together. We're one of the greatest cities in the world without exceptionalism. And ultimately, I think we're at our most powerful when we sit down, when we eat together, when we drink together. And we have a proud history of doing that in this city and in this country, and long may it continue.
Okay. I don't need to reread the question because it's long and it's complex.
It is quite long and quite complex. And to be perfectly honest, it sounds like there are some details and possibly history that I'm not fully au fait with. Zack was talking about disciplinary issues, and I just don't know what he might be referring to there. But so I want to answer the thrust of the question, and just to say absolutely clearly, anti-Semitism is totally unacceptable. Discrimination against anybody based on their identity is totally unacceptable. And I think we are a party that has a proud record of standing up for that, and also being very clear that it is absolutely possible and vital to be anti-Semitic, to call out anti-Semitism and to call out the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. Those two things are completely compatible. And I've always been very, very careful when I've been making statements about the actions of the Israeli government to be really clear that I'm speaking about the Israeli government, not making assumptions about Israelis or about Jews. And I know that many Israelis, many Jews around the world are incredibly distressed and upset at the actions of the Israeli government and do not feel that they represent them. On the point about conduct within our party, it's essential that we call out, all of us call out discriminatory behaviour whenever and wherever we see it. It's not enough to state that we ourselves are not anti-Semitic or opposed to anti-Semitism, opposed to racism in every form, but we do have a responsibility to call it out and speak in solidarity with those who are experiencing it as well.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything? No. Thank you very much, both of you. Do I have a Simni Olowi? No. Okay. In that case, I am going to read this question as well. If we're staring down the barrel to government propped up by reform in 2029, could an alliance with other left parties work? And if so, how?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, cooperation is central to the DNA of the Greens. At so many levels in councils around the country. We're in administration in 40 odd councils around the country, and in very, very many of them, almost all of them, we are working together with people from other parties. I've served as a member of the European Parliament, and there again, in a proportionally elected system, it was all about working together with other parties wherever there was common ground. So, and that's the sort of politics that I believe in. I'm a passionate supporter of and campaigner for proportional representation. For two reasons. One is that I simply believe that every person's vote should have equal weight. Every person's vote should count equally. And the second reason is, what will that do? It will force us all to have a more cooperative politics, to run the sort of politics where we sit down and speak with each other, where we try to work out where the common ground is, where we build policies that can stand the test of time rather than being swept away by elections that might change direction based on political parties being incentivized to target small numbers of voters in marginal seats. That doesn't serve our country well at all. So I am always up for considering cooperating with members of other parties wherever there is common ground. We've cooperated in Parliament on all sorts of votes already. It's quite early to be thinking about, you know, the specifics of the next general election. It's probably 4 years down the road. And if you look back at the last couple of decades of politics, if you looked at any 4-year period in that, any 1-year period in that, you would be really hard put to predict where things would be at the end of that period from how they were at the start of it. Things have been so changeable. But the prospect of a reform government or a reform-led government should really, really worry us. And again, this comes back to our political system, our electoral system, because we have a Labour government now with a 2/3 majority, 2/3 of the MPs on 1/3 of the vote. If the opinion polls are to be believed, if we see something like that going into the next general election, then it's possible that Reform could win lots more MPs, and that's an incredibly worrying prospect. I got into politics basically driven by wanting to challenge everything that Nigel Farage stood for. And so I think in addition to campaigning hard for proportional representation, that's a key thing that I work on, we also need to campaign so hard to win every single possible seat for the Greens that we can. And that's why I'm so passionate about building on those lessons that we have learned, about reaching out and winning seats. You know, at the last election, the biggest electoral swings were Nigel Farage and somebody else, and then my seat. We can compete. The Green Party can compete in winning these electoral seats. We know how to do that. We know how to win elections, and it's crucial that we do. And work in cooperation with everybody else where we've got common ground to prevent disastrous outcomes for our country.
Thank you very much, Ellie. And every Tuesday.
So this may be where we get argumentative, because I feel like this is a shift in tone from Ellie, and I really actually applaud it. Because Keir Starmer is failing so badly that the Green Party is surging, because the space to the left is so big. But we also know we're not the only party that is potentially surging. I think we need to do self-reflection that Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana launched a mailing list, and it's had over 500,000 people who have signed up to it. I think that 500,000 people should be in the Green Party. Now, I could go on the media, as I have been doing, and say, join the Green Party, we're the party of environmental, social, racial, and economic justice. And I really believe that. That's not about diluting our values. That literally are our values. But it's also recognizing that this 500,000 people, for whatever reason, aren't connecting that yet with our values. So it comes back to my opening statement. We need to step up. We need to be bolder. We need to make sure that those people know that if they align with our values, which I believe they do, that they are welcome in the Green Party. I consider Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana both personally and politically people I want to work with. That does not mean I am talking down the Green Party. That doesn't mean I believe we shouldn't go out there and fight for every vote and win every seat we can. But I do think in this moment in politics, when we are facing the rise of fascism, we're not even facing it, it's happening right now, we need to at least be curious about what people in a similar political space are saying. And I was really disappointed to hear Adrian go to Twitter and say, we're not the Jeremy Corbyn Support Act. Of course, we are not the Support Act, but I also think that's a way of shutting down conversations before they've even begun. Now, I don't know if we'll have an alignment, a coalition, a negotiation, whatever it might be. It is too early for that. But what I do know is when people are stepping up with that much support, who want to see us tackle the climate and nature crisis, who want to tackle racism in this society, who want to build council houses, who want so many of the things that we do, I don't think it's the time for petty tweets or tribal tweets. I think it's the time to be curious about what does a new politics look like? What does it look like when we get in the room and say, if we work together, how do we stop reform? How do we make sure that people in this country, particularly working class communities, particularly Black and Asian communities who are looking at the future, who are looking at what is happening in Gaza, who want to do anything to make it stop, and go, we can't retreat to just doing politics as normal. That doesn't mean we can't fight like we normally do. It doesn't mean we can't campaign, but it just means having a curiosity and an openness. So what does it look like when we work with people who want the wealth tax, who want to tackle the climate and nature crisis, and indeed who want proportional representation? The biggest change we could have in the country right now is to work with other MPs who, to get across the line, a change in the voting system. That would transform our politics. But it's not going to happen if we work in a silo or we talk about our distinct green brand. We do have a distinct green brand, but let's make sure we bring people into that brand rather than kind of shutting down the barriers and saying, oh no, they're not quite our party, we've got differences. We need openness right now, not isolationism.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a little bit puzzled, to be honest, at Zack's response to that, because the question was about alliance with other left parties, plural, and that was the spirit in which I was answering. And Zack, your answer has been very much talking about the Jeremy and Zara party. And there's a couple of things I'd say about that. Yes, 500,000 people have signed up to a mailing list, but you know, they haven't had to pay any money. They haven't said that they support the policies. They haven't made any commitment to join. They might be just wanting to vote for the name of the party and maybe not in a good spirit either. So I think we need to kind of be a little bit careful about it. And anybody who was looking for a party that was going to be an organised electoral force might justifiably be feeling that it's not terribly confidence-inducing what has been happening with the Jeremy and Zara party so far. Where we've got common ground, absolutely, let's cooperate. And to be really clear, you know, I've cooperated with Jeremy and Zara and lots of other people, including Labour and Lib Dems in Parliament, working for proportional representation and many other things. I think we need, you know, this kind of gets to the core of, are we looking at just a narrow segment of the population who might be attracted to another left party or to the Green Party? Or are we about reaching out as widely as possible? And I've talked before in some places about this really brilliant and useful research from More in Common, the Joe Cox organisation, just very briefly, that talks about, you know, the old binaries of left and right. They just don't describe British politics, the British population any longer. They talk about a kind of 7-segment model of the British population. Now, we can speak very easily to progressive activists. That's the segment that they call it. That's the one that we're all in. Probably everybody in this room is in. But as a party, we need to be able to reach out much more widely. With my election campaign, we explicitly reached out to 4 of the 7 segments. We need to have a strategy that speaks to people much more widely. And that's the inclusive strategy, not competing just over certain people who already agree with us, basically pretty much on anything, as we've said, but reaching out much more widely in order to win elections.
Thank you, Ellie.
Yeah, I want to take on this, reach out more widely. And lots of young people have joined the party since I've launched my campaign, saying very openly on social media that they have joined because they like my vision of the party. I've talked about trade union workers who would have never looked at the Green Party, but have now joined the Green Party and are saying, we are supporting Zack's vision. Michaela Loach, climate activist, joined the Green Party, saying very explicitly today she's joined to vote for me. Grace Blakely, a senior economist, amazing woman, she's joined the Green Party to vote for me. James Medway, former advisor to John McDonnell, he says he's joined the party to help the party and to vote for me. There are lots and lots of people who are saying that they have joined the party because they're excited by my vision of the party. I think the people who are not reaching more widely are the people who are saying, we are the Green Party, we have always been the Green Party, we are sticking to what we have always done, even if it just keeps us on 10%. What I want to see us do is to build this mass movement. I want to see millions of more people join the Green Party, not just for millions of people who vote for us, but actually millions more people vote for us because they can see our vision of what it is. I know that people care about the climate crisis, but if they can't get food on their table, heat in their homes, they can't get to work or hold down a job, they don't care what we're saying. Reaching more widely means, yes, speaking to progressive activists, but speaking to all the people in this country who are sick of water companies pumping sewage into the water and charging us extra for the privilege. People are sick of people paying more and more rent while unscrupulous landlords refuse to cap the rents, and we need rent controls. I am speaking to the people who want to see us in this country build the social housing and challenge wealth, power, and status in this country because not enough is happening. I am not talking about a narrow focus here of progressive activists. I am talking about the majority of people in this country who can get behind my vision, our vision, of the 99% versus the 1%. That literally is a unifying vision. Am I being divisive? Yes. If you're a multimillionaire and billionaire, I'm sorry, you're not included in my vision. Although even the multimillionaires and billionaires, some of them are saying, sure, tax us more. But what is unifying is working class communities, small business owners, people living precarious lives who are not just living paycheck to paycheck, but as a woman said to me the other day, I'm living prayer to prayer. All of these people, we can bring them together. That's how we expand the Green Party.
I have a question that I was going to ask a little bit earlier, and it is very much linking, so you will definitely be able to talk a lot more about on this issue, and it is about the Sultana and Corbyn party. And I do want to say as well, yes, we have had such an influx of new members right now. I can see that's the coordinator of London, and it's happening all up and down the country right now. And it's, we can't actively say it's you or it's you and Adrian. I think it's the excitement of everything. We are this excellent party right now that people are so excited to join and actually fight reform, fight fascism, and actually have alternative plans for this country. I think also it's really important to note as well, if we were to make any kind of electoral pact, as one of the most democratic parties with one member, one vote at conference, we make the policy, not the leaders. And the fact is it will come up to us to make that decision and be well informed with what is being proposed. So I am going to continue with this question, but more specifically, what the relationship you see the Green Party having with the new Your Party mailing list, which it currently is. And
It's not called Your Party.
yeah, well, they don't know what it's called yet. And what you see it to become, and our relationship we could have with them, or what you envision it might be, or be put to the party, and how you feel that as members you would like us to take on that policy.
Yeah. So first of all, going back to the last question, it was plural left parties. I don't know what the left party is. It's certainly not Labour, and it's definitely not the Liberal Democrats. So unless we're going into alliance with the Communist Party, I don't. It's clearly Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are the only party I think right now on the scene that you could conceivably go, that's a left-wing party, or they don't exist yet. Yes, they're just sign-ups, and yes, they don't have a name. But I think, well, one, we should be careful as a Green Party pointing at any party and talking about chaos. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that's beautiful. The democracy that we have as a party, that for anyone who's been to Green Party conference, we can spend an hour or two talking about a semicolon or what time the break is. And I wouldn't change it for, I would change it, okay, I'd have a little bit more agility. But I think that's a proud tradition of democracy and what grassroots activism looks like. So if this party is going down that route, I applaud that. That's more people getting engaged with democratic processes. It's more people who are able to have active agency and empowerment in their communities. I think when I think about what the number one problem is, other than wealth inequality, and I've got Gary Stevenson in my ear with that banging on that I need to talk about wealth inequality more. But I think the second thing is the lack of agency in communities. The fact that they look at politics and even the Green Party and they go, I don't quite know what the way is in there, or I don't quite know how to access it. And huge shout out to Dylan, who's at the back of the room, who's our amazing candidate in Hackney, who's running for council. Dylan used the services in Hackney and talks about very powerfully about how bad they are. There is no better story than someone with the lived experience saying, I've met a counsellor, Zoe Garbett, the amazing Zoe Garbett. I've been presumably inspired by her. And I now want to get in to not just be inspired by someone, but to get myself elected and be able to hold positions of power. And it's amazing doing that as a young person, and shout out to all the young Greens across the country doing that. So I think if other parties or other groups are also talking about empowering people, I don't think we should sniff at their mailing list. I don't think we should sniff at the fact they don't have a name. I think, again, we should go, I don't quite know why you're not doing that in the Green Party, and hands up, it remains a source of frustration. But we're not entitled to tell other people what to do. Other people will do what they do. And the best thing I think we can be is clear about our values, compassionate and open, and say, sure, do what you're doing. As it happens, I'm not convinced it's going to work. I don't mean that in a sniffy way. I just mean that in a way as someone who has deputy-led a party that's intensely democratic. I've seen how hard it is, even when you're up and running with over 800 councillors. I can only imagine how difficult it's going to be to start from the very beginning, not quite knowing what your values are and having competing values. But if they get up and running, great, let's talk about how we work with them. And if they don't get up and running, let's make sure we're the party that was proud about our values, but was also open to going, if that doesn't work, there is a home for you if you align with our values, and come join us here. I think that's about reaching open the hands of friendship, cooperation, and recognising the real threat here is reform, not Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, the people who support them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danny. So your question was about what relationship do I foresee the Green Party having with the Corbyn-Sultana Party? And to be honest, I just genuinely feel it's a bit premature, because it doesn't exist yet. So, you know, I go back to what I said earlier around cooperation being really central to the way that the Green Party does politics. And while I take Zack's point about, you know, interpreting the question in the light of what's the left party, actually the question was about, faced with a potential reform government, who would you cooperate with to oppose that? And I absolutely would cooperate with as wide a range of political parties as possible to get a majority to oppose that. And I think that, you know, we shouldn't be kind of being purist about who we will cooperate with, where there is common ground. That's what the core of it is about. So yeah, anybody is free to set up a new political party. The history of people doing it in British politics in recent years hasn't been exactly strewn with success. I do think it's probably a bit of a waste of energy, and I would love the people who are desperate for a fresh voice in politics, desperate for an alternative to Labour, absolutely come and join the Green Party. And I was just speaking to a couple of people in this room earlier who did come and join the Green Party, you know, a few months ago, and were saying how energising it was to be part of this party, how exciting it was to be part of this party. And that's been my own experience being part of the Green Party, just getting more and more involved. It's a slippery slope, right? We all get, you know, we all think we'll pay ourselves and deliver a few leaflets, and before long we're standing for election or being campaign coordinators, and, you know, finding it's like a hugely fulfilling aspect of our lives. And I remember, you know, last year back in my constituency, people saying to me, honestly, I just loved getting involved in this campaign. They were putting up poster boards, you know, in their neighbourhood, in their village, and saying, I've been having political conversations with people I thought were completely on the other side of the fence, but they've asked for a poster board, and now we're the best of mates, and, you know, really forming that sense of community. So politics, for me, has always been something that can bring people together. That was my whole experience. That's why I love politics. It gives you this license to go out and knock on doors and speak to people that you've never had cause to have a conversation with before, and you find all of this common ground across so many people who don't agree with us about everything. There are huge numbers of people who voted for me at the last election who really don't agree with me about everything. I wouldn't expect them to, but they want somebody that they can trust to represent them. They want somebody where they reckon that you've got integrity, they understand your values, even if they disagree with you on certain bits of policy. That's what I mean about inclusive politics. That's what I mean about being able to reach out to a really wide range of people. And I think the Green Party is actually far better placed to do that than a Corbyn-Sultana party. And that is core to what we offer people. That opportunity to vote for a political force that is credible, that they can trust, that they understand our values, and that is stepping up increasingly and on a hugely successful trajectory to doing even better.
Thank you, Ellie.
I was on a panel the other day with John McDonnell. I could pretend this was my own line, but I actually stole it from him, so I'm going to credit him. Someone asked us if we were going to work together in an electoral coalition, and his answer was brilliant. He said, I'm not that interested in electoral coalitions right now. I'm interested in intellectual coalitions. What does it look like when we find the people that we agree with on individual campaigns and we get out there and campaign with them? And I've loved the last couple of years. I've been going around the country largely with Jeremy Corbyn, with people from the Stop the War movement, lots of different movements, and we demand change. Going around to communities, particularly working class communities, and having workshops, talking about what a future politics looks like. And the reason why I think this matters is I'm really proud of the Green Party, so I'm not here for a second to suggest we need to be subservient to anyone or to be lying down or saying, you know, let's immediately stand aside or make pacts. I think we should stand on the platform that we're on and be really proud that we are the party that puts the climate and nature crisis at the centre of things. We've got over 800 councillors, we've got decades of proud tradition and history is successful. And we should be proud of that. But also to recognise we've done well at the last election, but if I think we're really honest with ourselves, 4 MPs, and then I think we just didn't quite make it in terms of the 4 MPs happened, but then reform kind of grabbed the narrative. Now, they do have billionaire backers, they have GB News, they can pump out 24/7 propaganda. But it's not enough for us just to whine about it. We've got to get better at social media. We've got to get better at community work, going to where people are already organised and working with them to amplify, to lift those stories. Because I think ultimately that's how more people in this country will know about the things we care about and how we build.
Thank you, Zack.
Thanks. I agree we need to get better as a party at our comms and our media, and that requires resources, and raising those resources requires credibility, it requires members, it's all a virtuous circle essentially, and we all need to be working towards that and investing more in that. I'd love to see, you know, we've got a field team of staff that have been hugely important in helping us to win elections by applying the target to win approach across the country, and I'm hugely hopeful for what's going to be achieved here in London next May. Wouldn't it be brilliant if we had the same resources to be able to invest in uplifting our air game as we've done our ground game as campaigners? And that's something that we've all got to work together on. And, you know, to those who kind of say, Ellie, why haven't you kind of caught light on the national stage in the same way that Nigel Farage has done? I mean, I guess I would say I don't aspire to being a Nigel Farage. I aspire to a different type of politics. And yeah, maybe it's slightly slower burn. Certainly it's less simplifying. Certainly it's far less polarising. Certainly I don't lie and scapegoat and all the rest of it in the way that Nigel Farage has done. And I don't think we should be aspiring to learn those sorts of lessons at all. I think our USP as Greens is a different style of politics. Sometimes I talk about it as, you know, channeling Jacinda Ardern rather than Donald Trump. You know, I think that there is real value in recognising the core of what Green values are and what they translate into in the way that we communicate. Now, maybe that isn't lowest common denominator, it isn't clickbait, but clickbait isn't what our politics should be about. Our politics should be about substance, and we can do that, and that can catch fire. And again, you know, my electoral swing was basically the same as Nigel Farage's. We know how to do that on a local level. Let's build those lessons into our strategy across the whole country for the next election.
Thank you very much, Ellie. For timing, I would like to get 2 more questions in, so I can knock down the speeches to 2 minutes. That's 2 questions, because I would like to get, we can get a lot more in there. My next question is from Rob Callender. However, firstly, could I give a round of applause because he's doing all the tech for this evening. And this follows on from what Ellie just said.
Well, based on the Green Party's track record so far and your own track records, how are you going to get yourselves on Question Time as much as Nigel Farage is?
It was probably me first. Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, their organisation is a bit of a mystery, to be honest. I have been on Question Time, and they did say very lovely things and said come back, but we have to wait and see. I think there's also a thing about kind of being proactive. When they were in my local area, I did kind of drop them a line saying, oh, available if you have anybody dropping out last minute. And part of it is just being available, right? And part of it is being kind of interesting and chirpy and kind of energetic and that sort of thing to encourage programs to have you on. Part of it also is like, I bump into Nick Watt all the time in the corridors in the Commons. That's got to pay off eventually, right? There's lots and lots of journalists around in the Commons. There's real opportunities to have conversations, to build relationships. And that's one of the reasons why I think it is useful for us as a party to have leaders who are there in the centre of Westminster, because literally the King's speech last July, it was me and Richard Tice coming out straight out after the King's speech and speaking to the BBC about our hot take on the King's speech, because we are available, because we are there. So I think that it is really frustrating when Farage gets on the media. If you speak to the BBC, they will say, well, it's not just about the number of MPs that you have in Parliament, it's about your polling and so forth. But I think we have hugely increased our visibility as a party, actually, in the last year in particular, since we got 4 MPs elected. We are much, much more visible, but I'm hugely ambitious about getting more coverage too.
Thank you, Ellie. And over to Zack.
So I don't bump into journalists in Westminster, but they just call me up on the phone and we have a conversation. And that's why, since I launched my leadership campaign, I've done now over 80 national interviews. Now, I'm not just talking about quotes in a newspaper. I'm talking where a journalist has sat down and said, I want to hear about the vision for the Green Party, and run a big article. Because I don't agree that it's binary between clickbait and substance. I think we need substance with clickbait. So when we look at Nigel Farage, I despise Nigel Farage's politics. But it is undeniable he is one of the most effective politicians this country has ever had. I hated Brexit, but he caused Brexit without even being in Parliament, just through the power of his storytelling. Now, he's playing politics on easy mode, so he can tell lies and misinformation, and I agree, and I hope Ellie wouldn't say for a second I was dabbling in that. We should never go into lies and misinformation, but what he does is he takes those lies and he tells a powerful story. That's easy mode. We're in difficult mode. We need to take science, research, and truth, but that on its own is not enough. People aren't interested in graphs and spreadsheets. We need to take that science, research, and truth and tell a powerful story that cuts through. And this, for me, is the very center of this leadership campaign. Because people sometimes say, why aren't we talking about policies more? We don't decide policies, you guys do. We all collectively do. We don't even really decide strategy, and there's not that much difference on strategy. I also support Target to Win. I want to scale up. The question, though, is when we knock on a door in London next May, or we deliver a leaflet, do we want the person behind the door saying, oh, you guys care about recycling, don't you, or polar bears or forests? Or do we want them to know that we are the anti-racist party, the anti-austerity party, the party that is building with an energy and a vibe and an inspiration right across the country? And the heart of that is in London. It's in Hackney, where we want to win. It is in Southwark, it's in Lambeth, it's in Lewisham, it's in Greenwich. I've started naming boroughs now, I'm going to get myself in trouble. It's in all 32 boroughs and the City of London. And the only way we can do that is by upping our communication strategy, combined with the solid ground game we know what to do. That's the winning combination.
You can still have a comeback if you want, or I can move into the next question. Sure, let's move on to the next one. It's absolutely fine.
I'm thinking about my comeback.
Okay. So my last question, and I'm really disappointed she couldn't make it really last minute. My next question is from Farha from Croydon Green Party, and this is a really important question because we have such a big pool of deputy candidates with some really great talent and a really mix of skills going on there, and a real mix of age groups, ethnicities. It's absolutely excellent.
I want to know what the question is.
This leadership contest has exposed some diamonds in the rough within the party, but all can't be deputy leader. What will you do as leader to elevate their voices and maximise their potential as voices within the party? So 2 minutes to end.
The deputy leader role is super important, and of course, Zack has been deputy leader for the last few years and will be able to speak really passionately and knowledgeably about exactly what that means, and hopefully how he has also been uplifted by the leadership and given opportunities, because of course Zack has been given opportunities to build his voice, to appear on national media. That is a key way in which the leadership can support and encourage and amplify the voices of deputy leaders. And there's leadership at all levels in the party. You know, we've got spokespeople across all of the policy areas, and they play a really key role in kind of amplifying our messages, speaking on national media when there are opportunities. There are so many opportunities for Greens to step into leadership roles. I talked earlier about feeling that politics is a team game. You know, it isn't just about the people at the head. It isn't just about that one charismatic person to grab the headlines. It's about all of us working together. It's about all of us showing leadership in our local areas. And it's about all of us showing leadership in a way that isn't at the front, but is kind of underpinning, supporting and uplifting other people. One of the things that I've really loved doing has been about reaching out to people in my community and in my constituency, encouraging them to step forward and stand for election themselves as local councillors. And we've had some really fantastic people come forward and get involved who hadn't previously thought about standing for election at all. And that's because there's a huge team of people around them supporting them. So I think this question about how the leadership can support deputies to build their platform and make their voices heard, absolutely, I would see that as a key role of the leadership, but also not just the deputies. The candidates that we're going to have through the Path to Parliament programme. I'm super excited about the people that we are going to be building up so that they are ready to take on the establishment parties, so that they are ready to win those seats at the next election. There are so many ways that we can and must show leadership, and all of us in leadership positions support others to step forward into that too.
Thank you very much, Ellie. And now over to Zack.
I think the first important thing to acknowledge is that future talent is not found, it's developed. So sometimes I hear conversations about we need to go out and find, you know, the next Caroline Lucas or the next Sean Berry. They worked for a long time, they have the skills, they have training, they have mentorship. So we really need to think about how that runs throughout the whole party. And this does come to a little bit why I think it's important that the leadership is not in Parliament. We have 4 members of Parliament right now, all of whom have either been leaders of the party or are currently running to be co-leaders of the party. Where's the skills acquisition in that plan? When Adrian and Carla ran to be leaders of the party, the whole platform was about that the leadership should be a platform for the future MPs in the party. I don't want to make any secret of it. I want to be in the next group of MPs. I want to make sure that there's a big group of MPs right here in London, and I'm one of them. I also want to make sure that I'm taking the 2 deputies to Parliament with me. But it's not just about that leadership team, it's about a much wider leadership team. And I don't want to say one thing in London and one thing in other places. So I think we need MPs in the north. I think we need an MP in Wales. And of course it is time for our London MPs as well. And there's no reason why we should just be looking at one. With the right air game, we nearly won Bristol East. That wasn't by accident. It was because Carla was all over radio and TV talking about Bristol. People don't see things as constituencies. They hear the place they live and they vote Green. Imagine what it would be like to have London talked about repeatedly on the national airwaves as a place that is a green hub where we're going to win Green MPs. That would up our share massively, including winning more councillors. So it's really important to me. Second thing I want to say is we're not diverse enough as a party. Now, I want to caveat that. There are amazing councillors across the country who are both working class and or Black and Asian or from global majority communities. When people say there's no diversity in the party, my campaign manager, Narani Rutharajan, who's amazing, she says, hello, I'm here, please don't erase my contribution. So it's important we recognise, and there's people in this room who are diverse, who are doing amazing work. It's also true, though, that the party is not as diverse as the communities we seek to represent. And I think there's nowhere where that's more stark than London, where we are underperforming in that sense. Now, it's not about beating ourselves up about it, it's what are we going to do about it? And I think it's not expecting people to come to a Hustings or to come to our local party. How can we all take individual responsibility to get out there, to get to a mosque, a synagogue, a church, a non-faith centre, a community centre, local food bank or the library, and not thrust Green Party politics at people, but say, I'm here to listen, I'm here to connect. Connect first, politics later. That's how we find the new talent.
Thank you, Zack. At this point, we should move on to the closing statements from each of the candidates. Can I ask if we can do them in 3 minutes? Is that okay for the two of you? Excellent. Who went first?
I went first at the start.
So
sorry.
I'm going to let Zack do
Yeah.
Zack's closing statement first for 3 minutes, and this time I will actually keep my eye on the clock. Sorry, Ellie.
Amazing. Doing leadership, Hustings, is a bit like chess. You start to make moves. And I'm guessing that Ellie's next move will be Zack's talked about communications, but not talked about strategy. So I just want to say that the former staff members who are allowed to endorse people in this race, Carla Denya's campaign manager has said that I am vital to election strategy. When decisions were made, he wanted me in the room. Sean Berry's campaign manager and comms person, as well as Carla's, has also said they want me in the room. So I don't think this election is about strategy. I don't think it's about policies. Once again, I think it's about who can cut through. Now, this is not an insular conversation about cut through. This is not just about who leads the Green Party. This is about the fact we are facing down the barrel of a reform government. Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say the Green Party play a pivotal role in stopping that happen. But we cannot stop that happen if we are just asking questions in Parliament, as important as questions are. We cannot stop that happening if we look at slow, steady, incremental change. We will stop that happening by being bold, being very clear about exactly what we stand for and exactly what we stand against. And when I talk about bold leadership, it's not, by the way, just my leadership. It's every single person in this room's leadership and right across the country. It's about community leadership. It's about recognizing the movements that are happening on the ground and in communities and the exact way to grow a mass movement. That mass movement of democratic energy is the principal way to stop the rise of reform. Communities feel like they're not connected to the decisions that are made to them. The Green Party have the answers to co-design, not just democratic energy, but all the decisions that are made in communities. We can't do that, though, if we're not seen or heard. If our polling ratings carry on just kind of bobbing along, they are moving up. But what about if they started soaring up at the same rate as the climate and nature crisis, at the same rate that reform are growing, at the same rate as the crises that we are facing? This is not the time to be timid or slow. This is the time to go hard or go home. So on Friday, when you get that ballot, when you look online and you think about who you're going to vote for, think about who has been going around this country for the last few years, bringing in new members, bringing in new trade unions, speaking boldly on the national media and growing my social media more than any other Green Party politician at the rate that I've been going. When you vote on Friday, make sure that you're voting bold, that you're not voting for slow and steady, but actually you're voting for us to be the party, to have the potential we can have. And please vote for me as your first preference on Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for being here. Because like I said at the start, this Green Party is about all of us in this party. Leadership can come from everywhere in this party. Now, yeah, Zack is an effective communicator. Of course, I wouldn't deny that. We need effective communicators everywhere in our party, and we need them in Parliament. There's a reason why Caroline Lucas is endorsing Adrian and myself as leaders of the party, because she recognises the importance of using that platform in Parliament that we all worked so hard to win. Because every time we speak out, after the media circus of a leadership election has moved on, once we're back to the day-to-day business of politics, being there at the centre of Westminster is where the political weather is made. It is important. I wasn't so convinced of it a while ago, but I absolutely am now. It is so important that our leaders are there on that political platform, able to speak directly, speak truth to power, hold power to account, day in, day out in Westminster. But that isn't just what this is about. It's also about what sort of party we want to be. How widely do we want to speak? Are we competing just on the same territory as potentially a new left party? Or are we recognising that we have a message that resonates with a really, really wide range of the population? Calling for climate action, that is the issue that unites the largest chunk of the population in the UK. So many people want to see a livable future for their children. Who knew? I mean, what a surprise. Of course, we have something that can appeal to so many people, but they need to know that we're a credible political force, that we're not just a protest vote. They need to be able to vote for us. We need to be on those ballot papers, and they need to see us winning and making real change happen when we do. That's been at the core of our success in recent years. It's been different from how it was before. It's been different from how it was even 10 years ago. We've learned how to translate that desire for a better country, that desire for greener, fairer policies into the activism that energizes people so much, because what we all get excited about, what our supporters get excited about, is getting out there and winning elections. Why? Because we know that that is what matters. That is what will ultimately change politics. So Adrian and I offer leadership that is focused on winning elections, that it's about being bold and credible. We've shown over the last year in Parliament that we do both together. We're asking you to put your trust in us so that we can build the Green Party to be the most positive, strong electoral force it possibly can be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now that does conclude this evening. Can I have one final round of applause for Ellie Chowns and Zack Polanski? You just want to ask that you can still join the Green Party and vote in these upcoming leadership elections. And you can still even join the only left-wing party that's out there that is an actual party by going to join.greenparty.org.uk. And who knows, you could join the best region in the country. I'm going to say that as the coordinator. And I do have one ask for you London members. The last few weeks, I have been fighting the most horrendous candidate in Barking. He is a supporter of Tommy Robinson. He's a supporter of Andrew Tate. He's a homophobe, and he wants to destroy half the wildlife in Barking. Tomorrow is the by-election polling day. Please come out and get out those green votes with me. If you check your emails, I have definitely been bombarding you with them. Please, please, please do. And we can get a brilliant environmentalist councillor on the council called Paul Howsland. Just so everyone is aware, also voting opens on the 1st of August. Please do not email me for information on it. Please email the ERO for the National Party. They will have all the information that you would need. And I just want to thank you all for sending in your questions. I know we obviously couldn't get through all of them, but I absolutely love that so many people wanted to actually interact with these hustings too. And thank you for being as brilliant as always.
And thank you to Danny as well.
Yeah.
Have a really safe journey home. Be calm and stay for a bit. So, yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks.